The unwanted child. The storm outside rattled the windows of the small, aging orphanage, a fitting backdrop to the loneliness that had settled in Oliver's heart at just 5 years old. He already understood what it meant to be unwanted. He sat on the windowsill, his tiny hands pressed against the cold glass as he watched raindrops race down in endless streams. He had done this countless times before, always hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone would arrive and take him home. But no one ever came for Oliver. He had arrived at the orphanage as an infant, wrapped in nothing but a tattered blanket, with no name, no note, just left at the doorstep like an afterthought. The caretakers had named him Oliver, after a character from a book about another orphan boy. It was supposed to be a name filled with hope, but as the years passed, Oliver wondered if hope was meant for children like him. Unlike the other boys and girls in the orphanage, Oliver was different. His face bore the signs of a rare genetic disorder. His upper lip was split from birth, his nose slightly sunken, and his right eye drooped lower than the left. The first time he saw his reflection in a mirror, he thought perhaps he was broken, that something inside him had not been made the way it should have been. The other children whispered about him when they thought they weren't listening. Some weren't so subtle. Why does he look like that? Maybe that's why no one picks him. He tried to ignore their words, tried to pretend they didn't sting, but the truth was, they did. More than anything, Oliver wanted to be like the other children, to be normal, to be chosen, to have a family. The cruelty of rejection. Every few months, couples arrived at the orphanage, walking through the doors with hopeful smiles, looking for a child to welcome into their home. The caretakers would gather the children in a line, dressing them in their best clothes, brushing their hair, telling them to smile. Oliver had stood in that line many times before. He had learned to force the brightest smile he could, even though his lip curved awkwardly when he did. He tried to stand up tall, tried to be the kind of child someone might want. But every time, it was the same. A woman's eyes would scan the children, her gaze landing on Oliver for just a second too long before shifting away. A man would lean down, asking other boys about their favorite colors or what they wanted to be when they grew up. Oliver would stand silently, hoping, and then one by one the other children were picked. He would watch as another boy or girl took the hands of their new parents, their faces beaming with excitement. He would watch as they were let out the door, leaving him behind. And Oliver would return into his room, pretending he wasn't crying. The caretakers tried to comfort him. "Your time will come, sweetheart," Miss Elmer, the elderly caretaker, would say, rubbing his back. "A special family will find you." But Oliver didn't believe that anymore. The birthday wish on his 6th birthday, Oliver made the same wish he always did. "I wish for a family." The orphanage threw a small celebration, just as they did for all the children. A cake with 6 candles sat before him, and his friends clapped and cheered. He pretended to be happy, but deep down his heart ached. He couldn't remember ever celebrating a birthday with parents. No one had ever kissed his forehead and whispered, "Happy birthday, my little boy." No one had ever wrapped him in a warm embrace and told him how much he was loved. That night, as he lay in bed, he stared up at the dark ceiling. "If I were different," he whispered into the night, "would someone want me?" A part of him wondered if there was something wrong with him, beyond his appearance. Maybe he wasn't kind enough, or smart enough, or special enough. Maybe he was just unlovable, a harsh truth. One evening, Oliver overheard a conversation between 2 caretakers. He wasn't supposed to be listening, but he had learned that sometimes the most important things were said when adults thought no children were nearby. "Poor boy," Miss Elmer sighed. "Every time we have a visiting couple, I pray they'll see past his face and give him a chance. He's a sweet child." The other woman replied, "But you know how people are. They want the perfect child, the picture-perfect family. And Oliver, well, you know." Oliver felt his throat tighten. He knew what she meant. People didn't want children like him. He clenched his small fists, fighting the burning behind his eyes. He didn't want to cry. He didn't want to feel this way anymore. That night, he made a new promise to himself. If no one wanted him, then he would stop hoping. He would stop standing in line, stop forcing smiles, stop believing that his time would come. He would be strong, because if the world didn't want him, then maybe he didn't need the world. Little did he know, his journey was just beginning. The boy who stopped hoping. The orphanage. Had a routine, a rhythm that never changed? Morning prayers, breakfast, school lessons, chores, playtime, dinner, bedtime. For years, Oliver had moved through this routine with a heart full of hope. But after overhearing the caretaker's conversation, something inside him hardened. He no longer rushed to the front when prospective parents visited. He no longer forced a hopeful smile or tried to stand taller. He simply stayed in the background, expecting nothing. The other children noticed the change. "Why don't you try anymore?" a boy named Daniel asked one afternoon. He was a few years older than Oliver and had always been kind to him. "Maybe the next family will pick you." Oliver shrugged. "They never do." Daniel frowned. "But what if they do?" "They won't," Oliver said simply. The truth was, it hurt too much to keep hoping. Each rejection felt like another piece of his heart breaking. He couldn't keep picking up the pieces anymore. A world that didn't see him? As the years passed, Oliver became invisible. He was no troublemaker, no loud child throwing tantrums. He did his chores without complaint, got decent grades in his lessons, and never argued with the caretakers. But in his silence, he was overlooked. The younger, cuter children were always introduced first to potential adoptive parents. If Oliver happened to be nearby, they would glance at him briefly before shifting their attention elsewhere. Even at school, he felt like a shadow. Other kids formed friendships, created inside jokes, and had sleepovers with relatives. Oliver had none of that. He had no family to write his name on the inside of his jacket, no mother to pack him lunch with a little note inside. His birthday came and went, each year the same as always, a cake, some claps, and a wish. He no longer bothered making. Time moved forward, but for Oliver, nothing changed. A cruel encounter. One autumn afternoon, when Oliver was about 12, a new volunteer arrived at the orphanage. A young woman named Vanessa. She was bright-eyed and full of energy, determined to bring joy to the children. She gathered them in a circle for a storytelling session, reading from a book with a deep, expressive voice. The younger children adored her. Oliver sat quietly at the back, listening. At one point, Vanessa looked up and made eye contact with him. "What about you, sweetheart? Would you like to read a page?" The children turned to stare at Oliver. Some giggled, whispering among themselves. Oliver shook his head. "No, thank you." Vanessa smiled kindly. "That's okay. Maybe next time." But there would be no next time. Later that day, Oliver overheard some of the other boys whispering in the hallway. She probably felt bad for him. "Yeah, did you see how she looked at him? She was probably trying not to stare." Oliver clenched his jaw and walked away. He was used to it by now. The pity, the whispers, the glances that lingered just a little too long. He hated it. The unexpected arrival. By the time Oliver was 15, he had accepted his fate. No one was coming for him. Families wanted babies or toddlers, children they could mold and shape, not a teenage boy with a face that made strangers uncomfortable. The caretakers never said it outright, but he could see it in their eyes. They worried about what would happen once he aged out of the system. And then, one evening, something strange happened. A man arrived at the orphanage. He was different from the usual visitors. He wasn't part of a married couple looking for a child. He came alone. His name was Mr. Harris. He was in his late 40s with silver hair and a tired look in his eyes. Miss Eleanor led him through the halls, speaking softly. Oliver sat at the dining table, pretending not to listen. He had learned that people said more when they didn't think he was paying attention. "I understand you're looking for an older child," Miss Eleanor asked. "Yes," Mr. Harris replied. "I know most people want younger ones, but I have my reasons." Oliver didn't lift his head, but his heart pounded. He had heard these words before, many times. Most of the time, the reasons weren't enough. A decision that changed everything. The next morning, Oliver was called into Miss Eleanor's office. He sat stiffly in the chair as she folded her hands. "Oliver," she said gently, "Mr. Harris would like to speak with you." Oliver's stomach tightened. "Why?" Miss Eleanor smiled. "Because he's interested in getting to know you." That didn't mean anything. People were interested all the time, and then, when they saw him up close, when they noticed the imperfections on his face, they always changed their mind. Still, he followed her into the visitors' lounge. Mr. Harris sat in one of the chairs, looking up as Oliver entered. His expression didn't change, not in the way Oliver had seen before. No flicker of pity, no uncomfortable shift of his gaze. Just quiet, calm observation. "Hello, Oliver," Mr. Harris said. "Hello," Oliver replied, his voice neutral. "Would you like to sit?" Oliver hesitated before lowering himself into the chair across from him. For a moment, they sat in silence. Then Mr. Harris leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I won't lie to you," said, "I'm not here to promise you a perfect life. I don't have a big house or a lot of money, but I can offer you a home, a real one." Oliver stared at him, waiting for the inevitable, but the moment when Mr. Harris would say something like, "I was hoping for someone younger," or "I need to think about it," but it never came. Mr. Harris continued, "I know what it's like to grow up feeling like the world doesn't want you. I won't pretend I understand your pain completely, but I do understand loneliness." Something about his words struck a nerve deep inside Oliver. "I won't force you to come with me," Mr. Harris said, "but if you want a chance, just a chance at a different kind of life, I'd like to give you that." Oliver sweat. His hands trembled slightly as he clenched them in his lap. No one had ever spoken to him like this before, and for the first time in years, something flickered inside him. Not quite hope, not yet, but something close. A stranger's home. Oliver stood by the door, gripping the worn-out straps of his duffel bag. Everything he owned was inside, though that wasn't much. A few sets of clothes, an old book with torn pages, and a small wooden toy he had kept since childhood, even though he had long outgrown it. Mr. Harris was finishing up paperwork with Miss Eleanor. Every few minutes he would glance at Oliver, as if to make sure he was still there. Oliver's heart pounded. Was this really happening? He had watched other children leave the orphanage with smiling parents and teary goodbyes. He had imagined this moment before hundreds of times, but now that it was real, he didn't know how to feel. Would Mr. Harris change his mind at the last moment? Would he regret his decision? The second Oliver stepped into his car, Miss Eleanor approached and placed a gentle hand on Oliver's shoulder. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. Oliver wasn't so sure. The long drive, the ride to Mr. Harris's house, was quiet. Oliver sat stiffly in the passenger seat, staring out the window as the orphanage faded into the distance. He didn't say much, and neither did Mr. Harris. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, though. It wasn't like the pity-filled quiet he had experienced with prospective parents before. This was different. It was patient. "You hungry?" Mr. Harris finally asked, breaking the silence. Oliver hesitated before shaking his head. Mr. Harris nodded. "All right, but let me know if that changes." They continued driving, passing rows of houses and open fields. It wasn't until they reached a small, cozy-looking neighborhood that Oliver realized this wasn't some huge mansion or fancy house. It was normal, not too big, not too small, just a regular home with a front porch and a garden that looked like it hadn't been tended to in a while. Oliver stared at it as Mr. Harris pulled into the driveway. "Well," Mr. Harris said, turning off the engine, "this is home." Home. Oliver didn't know what that word really meant. An empty room, a heavy heart. The inside of the house smelled like coffee and something faintly metallic, like old furniture. It wasn't spotless, but it wasn't messy either, just lived in. Mr. Harris led him to a room at the end of the hallway. It was empty, no bed, no furniture, just wooden floors and a window with closed curtains. Oliver stared at it, confused. "I figured you might want to pick your own stuff," Mr. Harris said, scratching the back of his head. "I didn't want to assume what you'd like." Oliver blanked. Oh, that was new. Most people made all the choices for him. He wasn't used to being asked what he wanted. "I got a spare mattress for now," Mr. Harris continued. "We can go shopping later this week for a proper bed." Oliver nodded, still feeling a little overwhelmed. "Do you need anything?" Mr. Harris asked. Oliver shook his head. "All right, I'll give you some space then." And just like that, Mr. Harris walked away. No forced small talk, no hovering, just space. Oliver sat on the mattress and stared at the wall. For years, he had dreamed about what it would be like to be adopted. He had imagined a perfect family with a loving mother, a father who would toss a baseball with him, maybe even a sibling to laugh with. This wasn't what he had imagined. There was no warm embrace, no overjoyed tears, just a quiet man who had given him a key to an empty room. Maybe that was better. Maybe this wasn't a fairy tale, but something real. New rules, new life. Life with Mr. Harris was different. There were no strict schedules like at the orphanage, no bells telling him when to wake up or when to eat, but there were rules. "First rule," Mr. Harris said one evening, setting a plate of food in front of Oliver, "we eat together. Doesn't have to be every meal, but dinner's a must." Oliver hesitated before nodding. He wasn't used to eating with someone. "Second rule," Mr. Harris continued, "you don't have to talk if you don't want to, but if something's bothering you, I'd prefer if you said something instead of keeping it inside. That rule felt impossible. Oliver had spent years swallowing his feelings, keeping them locked away. "Third rule," Mr. Harris said with a small smile, "no lying. If you break something, tell me. If you mess up, own up to it. I'll do the same." Oliver watched him carefully, searching for any signs of dishonesty. He found none. A test of trust. For the first few weeks, Oliver kept his distance. He followed the rules, ate dinner at the table, and did his chores without complaint, but he never let his guard down. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. Mr. Harris had left his car keys on the counter. Oliver saw them sitting there, untouched, as he passed by. Back at the orphanage, the other kids used to say, "People don't trust us. We're just charity cases to them." Oliver reached out, his fingers brushing against the cool metal. He wasn't going to steal them, he just wanted to see if Mr. Harris would notice. But before he could pick them up, Mr. Harris spoke from behind him. "You don't have to test me, kid." Oliver froze. Mr. Harris wasn't angry. He wasn't accusing him of anything. He just knew. Oliver slowly pulled his hand back. "I wasn't." "I know," Mr. Harris said simply. Oliver swallowed hard. "Why did you adopt me?" Mr. Harris exhaled, rubbing his hands together. "Because I've been where you are." Oliver frowned. "What do you mean?" Mr. Harris sat down at the table. "I grew up in foster care. I know what it's like to feel like nobody wants you, to feel like you're a burden." Oliver's stomach twisted. He hadn't expected that. "But someone gave me a chance once," Mr. Harris continued, "and it changed my life." Oliver looked down at his hands. He wanted to believe him. He really did. A promise kept. A few weeks later, Mr. Harris took Oliver shopping for furniture. Oliver had never picked out anything for himself before. "You don't have to get anything fancy," Mr. Harris said. "Just get what feels right." Oliver hesitated before pointing at a dark blue bed frame. Mr. nodded. "Good choice. What about a desk?" Oliver swallowed. Do I need one?" "Up to you," Mr. Harris said with a shrug. "Maybe you'll want a place to write things down, or draw, or just put your stuff somewhere." Oliver hadn't thought about that, but the idea of having his own desk, his own space, felt strange. For the first time, he wasn't just existing, he was building a life. As they loaded the furniture into the car, Mr. Harris turned to him. "Oliver, don't owe me anything for this. You don't have to earn your place here. You just have it." Oliver felt something stir inside him for the first time in years. The weight on his chest felt a little lighter. Maybe, just maybe, this place could be home. Learning to trust. The first morning in his newly furnished room, Oliver woke up before sunrise. The walls felt unfamiliar, the air too quiet. He had spent years waking up to the orphanage's routine, the distant chatter of other kids, the clanging of breakfast trays, the strict schedule that dictated every part of his day. Now he had none of that, just an empty morning waiting to be filled. He sat up, running his fingers over the smooth wood of his new desk. He had picked it out himself. That still felt strange. He had never chosen anything that was truly his before. The house was silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. He hesitated before stepping out into the hallway, unsure of where to go. And then he smelled it. Coffee. Breakfast with a stranger. Mr. Harris was already in the kitchen, sipping from a black mug. He wasn't dressed for work yet, still in his sweatpants and an old t-shirt. "Morning," he said, without looking up. Oliver nodded. "Morning." He lingered in the doorway, unsure of what to do. "You eat breakfast?" Mr. Harris asked, setting his mug down. Oliver shrugged. "Sometimes." Mr. Harris raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Instead, he grabbed a loaf of bread and placed it on the counter. "Toast?" Oliver hesitated before nodding. The sound of the toaster popping filled the kitchen. Mr. Harris slid a plate in front of him. It was a simple meal, just toast with butter. But Oliver wasn't used to someone making food for him outside of a cafeteria line. "Do you work every day?" Oliver asked cautiously. "Most days," Mr. Harris said, sipping his coffee. "I fix things, machines mostly, some construction work too." Oliver nodded. "Not today, though," Mr. Harris added. "Thought we could go somewhere." Oliver blinked in surprise. "Where?" "You'll see." A trip to nowhere. A few hours later, they were driving down a long stretch of road. The city slowly faded into rolling hills and clusters of trees. Oliver sat in the passenger seat, quietly watching the scenery pass by. "Ever been fishing?" Mr. Harris asked. Oliver shook his head. "Never." "Figured." Mr. Harris chuckled. "I used to go a lot when I was younger. Wasn't great at it, but it gave me something to do." Oliver frowned. "Why are we going fishing?" Mr. Harris shrugged. "Because it's quiet, and because I want you to know you don't have to do anything to deserve a day out." Oliver wasn't sure how to respond to that. Lessons in silence. The lake was still reflecting the sky like a mirror. There were no other people around, just the gentle sound of water lapping against the shore. Mr. Harris handed Oliver a fishing rod and showed him how to cast the line. "Patience is key," he said, settling onto a rock. "Most people think fishing is about catching something, but it's really just an excuse to sit and think." Oliver cast his line into the water and waited for a while. Neither of them spoke. It wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. Oliver realized he liked the quiet. The story he never told? After what felt like hours, Oliver finally broke the silence. "Why did they reject me?" Mr. Harris turned to him, surprised. "Who?" "The families, the people who came to the orphanage." Oliver kept his eyes on the water. "Every time someone looked at me, I could see it in their faces. They didn't want me." Mr. Harris exhaled. "People don't always know what they're looking for. Sometimes they think they want something perfect, but nothing ever is." Oliver clenched his fists. "I wasn't asking to be perfect." "I know," Mr. Harris said softly, "and that's their loss." Oliver let out a shaky breath. "I used to think maybe there was something wrong with me, that if I was different, someone would have picked me." "There's nothing wrong with you, kid," Mr. Harris said firmly. "They just weren't the right people." Oliver swallowed hard. He wanted to believe that. Maybe for the first time, he did. A new kind of home. When they got back, Oliver felt lighter. Mr. Harris tossed his keys on the counter and stretched. "All right, I'm starving. You ever tried making pasta?" Oliver raised an eyebrow, like from a box. Mr. smirked. "Nah, the real stuff." Sean spent the evening making pasta from scratch, flour dusting their clothes and the counter. It was messy and frustrating, but by the time they sat down to eat, Oliver realized something. He was smiling, not just out of politeness, but because for the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged. Breaking walls and building bridges. That night, after their messy but satisfying attempt at homemade pasta, Oliver lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling. The warmth of the day still lingered in his chest, the quiet of the lake, the unexpected comfort of fishing, the way Mr. Harris had spoken to him, not like a fragile kid, but like someone who mattered. For the first time in years, the thoughts that usually kept him awake, the rejection, the loneliness, the feeling of being unwanted, felt quieter, like they were distant voices instead of deepening shouts. But a part of him still held back. He had spent so many years building walls around himself, protecting what little he had left inside. Could he really trust this? Could he really trust him? The phone call the next morning. Oliver woke up to the smell of coffee again, but this time something was different. As he walked toward the kitchen, he heard Mr. Harris on the phone, his voice low but firm. "I know how this works," he said. "I'm not backing out. I just want to make sure he's not another case file to you." A pause. "Yeah, I get it, but he's more than just a number in your system." Mr. Harris exhaled sharply. "He's a good kid." Oliver froze in the hallway. His chest tightened. He had heard conversations about him before. Caseworkers, foster families, people deciding his future like he wasn't even in the room. But this was different. There was no pity in Mr. Harris's voice, no hesitation, just certainty. Oliver wasn't sure what to do with that. Learning to trust. Later that day, Mr. Harris brought him along to the hardware store. "I need to grab a few things for a project," he said, as they walked through the aisles. "Figured you might want to help." Oliver raised an eyebrow. "You figured I'd want to help?" Mr. Harris smirked. "You seem like the type who likes to know how things work." Oliver shrugged, but didn't argue. He was curious. They spent the next hour gathering supplies, wood, nails, paint, tools Oliver didn't even recognize. Mr. Harris explained what each one was for, but he never talked down to him. "You ever build anything before?" Mr. Harris asked as they loaded everything into the truck. Oliver hesitated. "No, but I used to fix things, stuff around the orphanage. It was easier than asking someone for help." Mr. nodded, as if that made perfect sense. "Then you'll do fine." Oliver frowned. "What are we even building?" "You'll see. A gift without a price." When they got back home, Mr. Harris led Oliver to the backyard, where a few wooden boards and tools were already set up. "We're making a bookshelf," he said. Oliver blinked. "For what?" "For you," Mr. Harris said simply. "Figured you might want a place for your stuff, your books, sketches, whatever you want." Oliver's chest tightened. No one had never made something for him before. He didn't know what to say, so he just picked up a piece of wood and started sanding it down, the conversation that changed everything. As they worked, Oliver felt something shift. He wasn't sure if it was the rhythmic movement of sanding, the scent of fresh-cut wood, or just the fact that for once he wasn't being treated like a burden. But suddenly the words spilled out before he could stop them. "When I was 8, there was this couple who almost adopted me," he said, his voice quieter than usual. Mr. Harris didn't react, just kept working. "They seemed perfect, nice. They brought me ice cream during visits, said they wanted me to have a real family. I started imagining what it'd be like to have a home, to belong to someone." Mr. Harris set down his hammer, but didn't interrupt. Oliver swallowed hard. Then, one day, they just stopped coming. No explanation, just gone. The caseworker said they changed their minds. Silence. "I stopped believing after that," Oliver admitted. "Stopped hoping. It was easier that way." Mr. Harris leaned back against the workbench, arms crossed. That's a lot for a kid to carry. Oliver exhaled. I just don't want to get my hopes up again. Not if, he hesitated. Not if this. To which Mr. Harris looked him straight in the eye. Oliver, I don't make promises I can't keep, and I'm not going anywhere. Oliver searched his face, looking for doubt, hesitation, anything that would prove him wrong. But there was nothing, just honesty, just someone willing to stay. A name on the door. 2 weeks later, the bookshelf stood finished in Oliver's room. It wasn't perfect. The edges were a little uneven and the paint had a few smudges. But to Oliver, it was the best thing he had ever owned because he had built it, because they had built it. And for the first time, his room didn't feel temporary. It felt like his. That night, as he lay in bed, he noticed something new. A nameplate on the bedroom door. Oliver. Not room 3, not foster kid, not just another case file, just Oliver. For the first time in his life, he belonged.